When I first started bookbinding, I always stressed when it came to doing the corners on the leather. I felt like all the work that I'd done up to that point, the materials that I'd invested, could go up in smoke with one bad corner out of 4. And there were times when that happened, where it was just too far off, I couldn't repair it. I looked at different tutorials. There aren't a lot of tutorials for doing leather corners online. And I think the reason is that they are tricky. There's a lot of feel and practice involved with it. And it changes depending on the thickness of the leather, the type of leather. It's always a little bit different. So there's always a little bit of figuring out as you go. But I'd love to say that they're stress-free now. They're not, but it's much better. I approach them with much more confidence, with much more enjoyment even. And I'm going to share with you the most simple method that I found. There are other ways to do it. This is the most simple one, the best one I think to start with. Let's take a look. Let's start with what we want to see in a corner. Then we'll go through how to make them. I'll show you how to make one. And at the end, you should be able to make your own. So here we have leather just on the little model corner that I made for the purpose. And you can see here we have a very flat seam. It's very much like one piece of leather. You can see it, but you can't really feel a difference. The corner, there's no little gaping hole. It's wrapped around nice and tidy. This is not always the case. Sometimes we have too much leather. See an opening gap there and then big overlap here. Sometimes you have not enough. I've done this more than once and it's so frustrating because too much, you can trim it down a bit. Too little, there's not a lot you can do. And then there's what I call the kiss corner, where this part looks all right, but as it gets to the corner, it opens up kind of in a little fish mouth or a little kiss. We're going to look at all 3 of those errors and how we can fix them. But to start out with, let's see how to make one of these. You begin with the corner of your book and you've probably glued on your cover and you have the flap over there. So your book would be open this way and this is your overlapping leather. I like to keep this nice and neat and uniform so that when it folds over, I have straight lines. As your leather gets wet with the glue, it can wander a little bit and then you just trim those. But if we start straight, it helps us put them over straight and keep them in good shape. But if I just fold this over like this and like this, I have this big bit sticking over. Now in oldie days, they would do this. They would take a pair of scissors, this is one method, and they would, I don't even know if these scissors can do this very well. They'd use big shears probably. They would cut that corner off, so it would look like that. They would fold it over, hammer all that down, and you'd have a functional corner. And you can refine it, you can get rid of little bits there. That's one method that they used to do. We're not going to do this one. We're going to do a slight refinement on that one in that we're looking to get this kind of a shape. Straight 45 degree and a little notch out of it. So how we do that? Let's start with this and we'll walk through the whole thing. Pen, ruler, and ideally a 45 degree ruler. So what I want to do is cut off that corner, same as this one, but we want to do it straight. Now, how much room to put here is always the question. And the rule that I use is whatever the thickness is of this board, sometimes you have 2 or 3, sometimes they're thicker boards. You could even have some wood there. So whatever this thickness is, you want to go that far, plus the thickness of the leather. This is always going to be easier the thinner your leather is. This leather hasn't been pared down, so it's quite thick, but I'm still going to make a decent corner out of it. If you can get this down, this is about 1 millimeter, maybe a little more. If you can get this down to 0.5 millimeter or just feather it right out to very paper thin ends, your corner is going to come together much more nicely. I don't always like the look of that, but if it's going to be covered with an end paper anyway, it's not a big deal. I tend to like my books a bit thicker, softer, more luxurious feeling. So I leave it a bit thicker often. So in this case, we have about 1 millimeter of a board and about 1 millimeter and a bit for our leather. Now remember, we can always trim this back a little bit, but we can't grow it. We can stretch it sometimes, but we can't really grow it. So I'm gonna give myself a little extra slack, and I'm gonna make a pen mark on this nice black leather. I don't know why I chose this because it's probably difficult for you to see. But I'm gonna go on that line. I'm gonna grab this. It has a new blade in it. I've cut up 2 little pieces of leather there with it. I kind of think of it, I tend to try and conserve blades and things. I don't know why I'm picky about that, but it's habit, I suppose. But think about it like a blade, a cover. Spend one of these little sections for each cover, and that way you get a brand new one. It's nice and sharp, easy to handle. We're gonna cut this corner off, but I'm not gonna cut it straight up and down. I want a bit of a chamfer, I think they're called, or a chamfer in the States. So I'm gonna angle my blade away from the board, not toward the board, but away from the board. And I'm gonna start in the middle. This leather is very soft and it's very stretchy. Look at that. It's very stretchy. So if I start here, it's going to be kind of warped out by the time I get to the end, and I'll get a big loop. So I'm gonna start in the middle, and nice and soft. There we go. And then I'm gonna flip it around the other way. Difficult to film, but easier to cut. He said confidently. And now I have that little cut out of there and this little bit under here. So that's our first bit, and you can see it's angled. I probably could have angled it a lot more than that. I think I was busy talking. And I should probably have angled it about that much. There, so I have a nice, now a chamfered edge. And by the way, had I not left myself a little bit extra, that would have been even more scary, correcting that lack of angle. But this way, I know I have a little room to work with. Now, if we just fold that over like that, it comes together, but we get the little kiss corner, just like that one. So if you're wondering why you have a kiss corner, it's because this leather right on either side of that corner, there's too much of it. But don't worry, because you remember this little divot here, we're gonna make one of those. Now we don't wanna go right to the corner. Imagine a line coming straight out from there. We wanna be on that line, but not quite to the corner. Move out from the corner 0.5 millimeter. If you're not too familiar with metric, think about half the height of a dime. So very thin little dime, just go up halfway. And not quite to the board. So I'm gonna go there, and I'm angling again away from the book, not toward it, but away from it. And we get that little chamfered corner. Now you see how it kind of has little horns here? Sometimes that can cause the little kiss thing again. Yeah, right there, you see? So that's caused because when I cut the leather is so kind of flexible and nice, which is lovely to hold, but difficult to work with. It will stretch out like that. So I'm just gonna take the scissors and just very conservatively cut off some of the edge there. So let's roll this over, and you can see now there's a little bit of extra leather there, but don't worry about that, because when the leather gets a little bit moist with the glue, it almost turns into putty a little bit. We need some putty to work with. So we've made one of those. let's bring out our glue. If you use paste, if you make paste out of the wheat starch, it sticks really well. This PVA in here, even though it says paste, it sticks really well, paste does, and it dries slowly, so it gives you more time to do these things. And you can actually mix them if you want to slow the PVA down a little bit or speed the paste up a little bit. You can do that just by mixing the two. They're both a water-based product, and one just has the kind of plastic glue, polyvinyl acetate, and the other one has wheat starch. Same stuff you're making bread out of, I think. Okay. So we have these two, some glue on them. Now, if your glue seems to be like here, you see how it's really soaked in and it's almost disappearing? I want a little bit more than that, not a lot more. I don't want it to be gushing out everywhere because I just wind up having to clean that up and it's annoying and I feel like I'm just wasting glue, gluing paper towels or cloths or whatever. But you want a fair amount on there. I'm going to take one side, wrap it over. Now you see how stretchy this leather is. This is goat hide. It's not expensive, this one. I mean, comparatively speaking, it's 40 pounds, so about, I think that's about $50 or $55 American off Amazon, pre-dyed like this. So I get that nice and sticky down there. And then when I fold this one over, I just pay special attention to this overlap. Now this one, I may even have a little bit more than I need. I could have trimmed that a bit more aggressively even. But you'll see what's happening here. The end here gets really soft. I can round it a bit, squish it this way, squish it that way, this way, that way. You can even tap it down with a hammer if you're trying to get a really thin corner. You can just give it a little tunk, tunk, tunk. Works really well, pressed with a fingernail. So here we have a nice, neat little corner. Now, because we left that little space off the corner, we don't get the little open bit. Sometimes you get this little hole there, which I did in this light leather because it's easy to see. Here, there isn't one, so even if it were easy to see, you'd be seeing nothing. But it keeps it nice and tucked in and flat there. You can even let this dry, and if it's not quite how you want it, re-wet it with a bit of glue, mold it around with your finger, tap it. I notice this one seems a little bit kissy, so I can just push it in. Because the structure of the leather is right, I can make that the right shape. And there we go. So, if you have this problem where it's overlapped, it's open, that means you have too much this way. You need to trim it down a little bit. Remember to trim blade away and get that nice angle on there. It makes it easier. So this problem, too much here, trim it back. This problem, not enough here. There are two ways to deal with that. One is when the leather's moist with the glue or even a little bit of water, push it, push it, push it, stretch it, stretch it, stretch it. I've saved books where I've made it just reach where I need it to be, clamp it down, and you can sometimes get this to close up. The problem is closing up this little bit here is very difficult at that point. You can do it. Sometimes you get lucky. Other times you get either a little kiss corner from it, maybe you can trim that, or you get the little fish mouth, which is difficult to get rid of. Not impossible to fix, usually, but difficult, and sometimes it's a game breaker. So when I cut, I always try and leave a little extra. Now, if you're getting this little kissy corner, little fish mouth, then you've got extra here. And especially if you're cutting all the way across in one go and your leather starts to flex, you'll get like a little ski jump effect on the end here. Sometimes when you're cutting these out, if it's very flexible leather, you get a little ski jump, like little horns. That can cause this. Easy fix, just trim them down, round them off a little bit, but make sure you leave this little gap here because that's what plugs the hole in the end and gives a nice, tight, solid corner. And finally, as we just talked about, the little opening, little kissy mouth, make sure, not kissy mouth, the little whistle mouth, I guess, this little bit here. It's important to have that. So let's look at our sample here. We're going to glue this one up and make a third little sample just so you can see it now that we've talked through everything. I'll make sure that I press it together and kind of dry fit it. But since we've done that while we were talking about it 3 or 4 times, this one should be all right. If you're worried about the fit and you've dry fit it, but you're not confident that you won't need to kind of stretch it or push it around, do the end of your book, do this end of the book first, because this end is so long that you've got a lot more room to kind of mess with there if you need to stretch it. So here we're going to start by pulling this side over. A little bit too much glue there, I over-glued, but the moisture's nice to have. I press here and try and make this nice and straight. Make sure that this is in the right place and not too far this way, or we'll start to get that kissy mouth. And we'll fold this one over. These can fold over a little bit because we did that angled cut and they're nice and thin. We just tuck the one side under the other side. And then with the moisture, mold it how we want it. The glue holds everything in place. I make a donation to the glue cloth again. And we have a nice corner, no hole in the end there. There's a little bit of a fold where that comes together. We just push that in, one under the other. The glue seals it up. And we have our 3 corners. Again, this looks like it might have a bit of a point. It's very flexible. Very malleable when it's wet. And we have a little mountain range of finished corners. I hope that helps take some of the stress out of your making of the corners. I highly recommend, if you're nervous about it, make some little squares out of the board and the same size out of leather. Just offset it a little bit so that it's about 1.5 centimeters, half an inch, something like that around there. And then just practice. Do the little cut, make the little shape, which I just glued up so I can't show you again. Make the little shape with the 45 and the divot and practice. Do about 10, 15, 20 of them. It's a really good use of your scrap leather. The little funny edges of the hides that you don't know what else to do with. Practice corners. And that's us. We have our little corners and a little more confidence, hopefully, in putting leather on the covers. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a great week. Be kind to each other, and we'll see you in the next video.